Your Excellency, Mokgweetsi Masisi, President of the Republic of Botswana, honorable ministers and distinguished visitors, representatives of the Oxford School of Global and Area Studies and the African Studies Center, and distinguished guests. It is my distinct honor to welcome you to Said Business School tonight for this very special event. This evening, His Excellency, President Masisi, will give an insightful lecture on democracy and economic development in Africa, followed by a Q&A involving all of you. This event is hosted in collaboration with the Said Business School and the African Studies Center. My name is Peter Drobak, Director of the Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship here at Oxford Said. And I'm joined today by the head of the Oxford School of Global and Area Studies, Professor Tim Power, as well as the director of the African Studies Center, Professor Wale Adebanwi. And he'll lead the Q&A session with the president. This is a particularly special occasion for me. I've had the privilege of living and working in many countries around the world on almost every continent, and I can say unequivocally that none is as magnificent as Botswana. My wife, Neo, is sitting here somewhere. She's in the back, is a proud daughter of Botswana. Our son was born there. Oxford and Botswana also have important connections that highlight the value of education. Botswana's first president, Seretse Khama, and third president, Festus Mogae, both studied here in Oxford. And in an era of rising global uncertainty and tension, Botswana's unique story of democracy and inclusive development will enlighten us all. At Said Business School, these events are important for us to demonstrate our commitment to the African continent and to work closer with our colleagues from other departments. And this is because 4 years ago, our dean, Peter Tufano, pledged to have at least 10% of the MBA class coming from Africa, which is more than 5 times the global average for international MBA programs. And I'm proud to say that for the last 3 years running, at least 11% of our MBA class hails from across the continent. By having larger representation of African students in our programs, we're better able to inform and educate the rest of the student body on opportunities on the continent. And events like this open conversations and networks for students across the university looking to return to or to work in Africa. And now to introduce our distinguished speaker. His Excellency, Mokgweetsi Masisi, President of Botswana, is an educationist at heart. After graduating from the University of Botswana, majoring in English and history, he started his career as a teacher. And this rise through education gave him grounding for a successful career in politics, serving in various cabinet portfolios, including Minister of Education, before becoming Botswana's 8th vice president by the time he was 52. As vice president, he was responsible for the oversight of government programs on poverty eradication, economic diversification, employment creation, and other flagship programs such as the National AIDS Council, Rural Development Council, and leader of the House of the National Assembly. President Masisi was sworn in as 5th President of the Republic of Botswana earlier this year on 1st April 2018. Please join me in welcoming President Masisi to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you for a very hearty round of applause. A Master of Ceremonies and a brother-in-law. The Dean is in his absence of the Said Business School, Professor Peter Tufano, and your Deputy, Professor Jonathan Reynolds. The head of the Oxford School of Global and Area Studies, fellow Floridian, Professor Timothy Power. The Director of the African Studies Center, Professor Wale Adebanwi, distinguished guests, our dear Minister, there she is. Minister Dr. Unity Dowd, our Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of Botswana, Acting High Commissioner, Ms. Daniels, distinguished guests. It is a distinct honor for me to have been afforded this rare opportunity to address you on a very important subject of the prudent management of resources in Botswana. This honor is also extends to the entire nation of the Republic of Botswana. This is indeed inspiring in that it is illustrative of the confidence with which our friends like the leadership of the Oxford University still have in Botswana's governance system, particularly on how we have prudently managed our limited resources over the past 5 decades. It is a known fact that at the time of our independence in 1966, Botswana was among the 25 least developed countries in the world. But put more bluntly, one of the 25 poorest nations of the world, commonly characterized as a basket case. Some observers even went to the extent of questioning the viability of our existence as a sovereign state. There was little to encourage many people to see a reason in such logic. And I might add, there were many African leaders too who questioned the wisdom of our independence pursuit. However, with innate determination, our forefathers were not deterred from going ahead with the Botswana project. My being here today and addressing you on this important topic therefore bears testimony to their fortitude and resolve, demonstrating that where there is a will, there will always be a way. Director of Ceremonies, the subject before us on prudent management of resources presupposes the existence of natural resources in the first place. In the case of Botswana, the latter has always been in the form of our natural endowments, our mineral deposits, our flora and fauna, the land and the people. The primary focus with regard to these has always been, and God willing will always be, the people, as the owners, the beneficiaries, and the driving force behind the exploitation and ultimate use of such resources. As you might be aware, the natural endowments of Botswana are found all over the country. At the inception of our republic, we deliberately made a choice that every deposit and other riches found on our land will be regarded as a collective good, a national good, and not an individual, ethnic, or religious good. This was born out of the realization that not every piece of the territory will be equally gifted or endowed. As such, each and every one of our constitutive areas agreed that resources found in their area will be held in custody and utilized by the central government for the benefit of all citizens. To better manage and achieve this, our forefathers decided that ours will be a constitutional and multi-party democratic republic, modeled after the Westminster constituency-based system. A republic premised on the primacy of respect for and commitment to the rule of law. We realized and we were convinced that a democratic discourse, as has always been tradition throughout our respective communities and system of governance, predating the independence era, was best suited to take us forward. Our democratic culture ensured that there was accountability through checks and balances, as enshrined in our national constitution. The conviction was that a democratic system will engender and ensure that the primary shareholders, our people, were at the epicenter of the formation and functionality of their structures of governance. This is guaranteed through periodic holding of local and national elections every 5 years, a practice that has continued without failure or interruption since 1965, when the first were held, and is set to continue next year when we hold our 12th successful national election. So if you hear of me as president post the election, you must know I won. If you don't, I clearly will not have won and I'll be home. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our enduring commitment to the rule of law has meant that Botswana subscribes to the doctrine of separation of powers. In this respect, We have a vibrant and independent judiciary that functions unfettered in its adjudicatory role. We've been served well as a republic by a visionary leadership that consistently adhered to shared values and principles, particularly the respect for human rights, democracy, the rule of law, and the spirit of consultation and botho, humility. Our governance system, which is based on consultation and inclusiveness, has also ensured accountability through competition of ideas. Being a plural polity, those in government have always been on their toes in view of the challenges posed by those in opposition to ensure the relevance of their policies to the needs of the people, and that they are in sync with the laws of the land. In addition, Botswana continues to have a vibrant and independent media and civil society which have reinforced accountability by government. Furthermore, the government of Botswana has established independent governance institutions such as the Independent Electoral Commission, the Auditor General, the Directorate of Public Prosecutions, the Directorate on Corruption and Economic Crime, the Ombudsman, and the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Board, PPADB, to inculcate a culture of accountability and transparency. We have also established a parliamentary oversight body called the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, which monitors the use of government funds and is always chaired by a member of an opposition political party, as per the rules of Parliament. Our strong conviction in the principles of good governance has ingrained a culture of sustainable peace and tranquility. This has enabled Botswana to continue to enjoy relative economic prosperity, characterized by the prudent management of the resources for the benefit of its citizens. For us, this is testimony of our social democracy with special characteristics. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our success in the prudent management of resources can also be attributed to an elaborate system of development planning that the country adopted from the time of our independence. We have consistently ensured that we have national development plans executed every 6 years through a national budget. The fundamental planning objectives set out in national development plans since Botswana's independence have placed emphasis on sustained development, on rapid economic growth, economic independence, and social justice. In addition, we have a national vision. Currently, the second national vision developed is Vision 2036, which sets long-term goals as to the direction the country intends to take. The aspirations of our national vision are in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We have also developed a robust system of planning premised on the bottom-up approach. Botswana has statutory local government entities that serve to deepen and broaden the local democratic culture, and their representatives are elected by the people in their own localities. This has enhanced a culture of inclusiveness and ownership. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've stated at the beginning of my remarks, our people remain the most valuable resource, the most valuable, sustainable resource. Throughout the years since independence, we have endeavored to put them at the center of management of all our resources. Returns from the extraction of mineral deposits and those derived from the tourism sector have been invested in the provision of social services to and for them. And I dare say, every single one who calls themselves a citizen of Botswana in this room has benefited from our mineral resources. And so have their families. This has taken the form of free and affordable education, free and affordable health, including investment in infrastructure to enhance a better standard of living. We have graduated from being among the least developed countries at independence to the current upper middle income status because of the prudent manner in which we continue to manage our meager resources. This gives credence to our consistent message that our diamonds, and I repeat, our diamonds are for development. They always have been, and there always will be. In our current Vision 2036, we have set ourselves, among others, the target of being a high-income country by the year 2036. The vision further enjoins us to strive and become a knowledge-based economy. To that end, the continued support of our partners to our development agenda remains invaluable in achieving these goals. Distinguished audience, as an open and transparent country, Botswana remains committed to strengthening institutions that play an oversight role, including free press and an independent judiciary, as well as sustaining an apolitical public service. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we consistently review our national laws to identify their relevance, and we will be presenting a bill to Parliament pertaining to the declaration of assets and liabilities by senior public servants and politicians. The bill seeks to strengthen the existing anti-corruption laws in the country. And in any event, anybody who seeks to do anything about corruption had better start with a solid baseline. This will contribute to that. In a nutshell, the key pillars of the prudent management of resources are good governance, inclusiveness, commitment to the rule of law, democracy, planning, as well as investment in the human capital. In conclusion, Director of Ceremonies, I wish to extend my profound gratitude to the African Studies Center and the Said Business School of Oxford University for this important opportunity to address you today on a topic that is very dear to my heart. And let me thank you, the audience, for your listening and the anticipated brilliant questions I shall get. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. At this time, I am pleased to invite Professor Wale to begin the conversation.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I used to teach a class called The Politics of Natural Resources in Africa while I was at UC Davis. And every year for about 6 years that I taught the class, we often talk about the wars, the conflicts in most of the resource-rich countries. And then we get to talk about Botswana. And almost every year the student asks, why is Botswana different? I often have to answer that question as a student of natural resources. I want the president of Botswana to answer that question for me.
I was very curious what you said, but here's my answer. We started off by anchoring our values of governance in our cultural values of governance. And critical, among those was a commitment to include everybody in the resolution of a challenge or the development of any plan going forward, either as a community or a nation state. Based on that, our forefathers, our original leaders, and in this case, the first president and his peers, out of the realization of what was going on in Southern Africa at the time, and prior to that, where you had the British South Africa Company literally marauding with Cecil John Rhodes all over the subcontinent, plundering and causing mayhem and misery, decided not on our land. And very fortunately, we had been ignored by the Brits, not these Brits, the older ones. We had been successfully ignored, and it was believed that we were really a basket case. And our leaders engaged in discussion with every leader in the land to commit to the principle of sharing the resources, if any. And so, after independence, legislation was promulgated which bound all to that principle. And so in Botswana, you would never have a private mine or any company owning anything underground. it all is owned by the nation state. So when diamonds were discovered, I think those who discovered them did not quite understand what we meant. So they came up to government and said, look, we discovered these diamonds, give us a license, we want to mine. And not quite so. So they were stopped and we got around the table as as we would do in Botswana. And we hashed out a deal by which a license would be given, but given to a new company, 50% shared between the finders of the diamonds, in this case De Beers, a global icon, and this measly, poor, malnourished country owning 50% and knowing nothing about diamonds. And the company would actually carry out the mining. And they would pay taxes and royalties to the government. And the government would lease the land to them, a mining concession, over a fixed period, renewable. And so they agreed to the terms, and Botswana was born. One of the most successful partnerships between a government and a private entity in Africa. And over time, the citizens of Botswana, because it was part of the deal to train them, learned, went to school, studied diamonds and the mining of them, the processing of those, and the capacity, the knowledge base, the technical competence grew. And so did the sophistication of selling them and marketing them. And so you had this wonderfully successful company which contributed so much to the income of the nation state. And it was distributed through the parliamentary process, as I have described. And at each turn, when the negotiation was due, as is now, we're going to get into negotiations with De Beers of renewal of lease, we got better at our game. So well we got that it's resulted in a sharing of the returns clocking an 80-20 ratio. So we get 80% of the value of our diamonds, and De Beers, which is still proudly motivated to continue, gets 20%. You can imagine just how much it is. So commitment to being faithful, frugal, patient, willing to learn, and holding hands with a private entity has made us what we are.
So when you became president about 7 months ago, in the context of what you have described, did you feel that you would just be coasting, or were there big challenges that you had to face?
Oh, the big challenges, oof. The big challenges. But they're exciting challenges. One of the biggest challenges that I face is youth unemployment. If you look at our population pyramid, it should explain itself quite easily. But we have many, many young people who are educated, and the economy has not grown enough to be able to accommodate them. And so there is need for a real transformation across the economy, from the training of the curricula in the tertiary institutions, the mix of the enterprise and the economy, the budgeting system and the incentives given, and the inspiration to believe there will be a tomorrow. So that's what's exciting. And it becomes more exciting when you imagine that we're going into an election next year. I've never seen the opposition so excited.
Now, what are the contrasting lessons that you think are there for other African countries in the context of the experience of Botswana? And what kind of discussions do you have with your fellow heads of state from some of the more challenging cases in the continent when you meet them, especially resource-rich countries?
Well, the contrasting lessons, to be honest, the topmost would have to be peace and conflict resolution. It's not that we are without conflict. Contestation of ideas exists. Preferences and prioritization challenges exist. One geographic area of the country is less developed than another, and people get stirred up by that. And even those communities around which the resources are found, like diamonds, you'd often get spikes of, arguments which suggest that they own the resource more than those who are further away from it. And then, when you ask them, what is the rate of diminishing ownership as you move further away from the resource, it becomes pretty complicated. But we have developed a unique way of embracing each other. And one of the best policies I think that we came up with, or two very good policies. One was a land policy, which provided very well for nation building. Anybody who is a citizen of Botswana is permitted by law and right to settle and get land anywhere in the country. Nobody has a right superior to another over land in a particular area. So even if you thought you belong to ethnic group X, your right to land in that area is not any better than a right of any other citizen. So it's a first come, first served basis, and so you get people settling everywhere. There's a lot of mobility. When schools were built and there were boarding schools, young people, when they were growing up, schooled everywhere. The other policy that was that served us very well was to enable persons to serve where the service needed them. So you could not, for instance, choose to say, I want to serve in an area where I come from. So there's a lot of travel and exchange of locations, mobility. And that, I think, has stood us in good stead. When it comes to what I converse with leaders who are from resource-rich nations, frankly speaking, I haven't had the opportunity to converse with too many of them. But the few that I did, take a place like South Sudan, Sierra Leone. I've had a bit of a discussion with the DRC, but then I did say to him, look, let's wait until after the election and then we'll see who we talk to. And I guess when they come on, they'll say, wait until after the election, see who. But the bottom line is, I have said to them, we are open to share our experiences. We firmly believe some of the processes we've gone through will aid them in bringing about peace in the exploitation and sharing, utilization of the natural resources. And it also comes with skill and capacity. The ability to stand your ground when negotiating with much richer companies in your nation state who come to exploit whatever resource there is. Your ability to ensure that there is good governance and we're free of corruption, or you minimize the potential for corruption in those dealings. Ensure that you entrench the rule of law, and there is a judiciary that's independent, competent, agile, and the instruments of law are passed for them to use and settle disputes, if any. It brings about confidence, and obviously the financial system, et cetera, et cetera. But we have offered this assistance to a number of countries, and there have been varying degrees of willingness to take this up. So we encourage more to come.
Okay. While you were speaking, Mr. President, you mentioned Ceci Rhodes. In the interest of full disclosure, I just wanted to say I'm occupying the Rhodes chair. I would now like to open it up to the audience. Please raise your hand. We have the mics around. We'll take a set of 3 questions first, and then we'll go to another round. Can we start with the lady here?
All right. Good evening, Mr. President. My name is Chiduru. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm a student of an MBA student here in Said Business School. My question is a little bit, it's less political, just personally. I was reading that you actually had a brief experience acting, and you and you actually did, play some lead roles in some famous dramas and plays, and you actually got some awards in that respect. So I think my question is, now that you're president, has there been ever a time that you've reflected and said, perhaps I should have gone down the road of acting, and maybe now I'll probably be getting some Oscars or Golden Globe awards?
Or just act my way through it.
Exactly.
No, truly no. No, I've never thought that I would have taken up acting as a career. Never crossed my mind. But I also never thought I would be doing what I'm doing. This is almost like a pure accident. But it's an enjoyable accident. I quite like being president.
Yes. Can we take a question on this side, please? At the back.
Hello, Mr. President. Thank you for your talk. My name is Garang. I'm South Sudanese by descent and MBA student here. I heard you speak about concerns regarding youth unemployment. One of the policies or statutes, if I'm aware of, is citizenship in Botswana. And dual citizenship is supposedly not allowed beyond age 21. And I understand as part of capacity building, you have a lot of young people studying overseas, particularly those in medicine who might wish to stay where they are to get advanced training. How are you going to help resolve that, where the dichotomy might be a dilemma between advanced training and taking that skill set back to Botswana, or relinquishing their dual citizenship where possible and returning soon after their graduation from medical studies?
Well, let me just make a few corrections. One is that it's not supposed that there is no dual citizenship. Dual citizenship is illegal, period. You can only hold 2 passports if you are forced by circumstance to acquire the passport of another country from birth. But when you are 21, when you reach 21, is 21 or 18? 21, you are supposed to make a choice. You have to make a choice, one or the other. We made an attempt recently to actually provide for dual citizenship, but we then discovered we had to change so many laws, some of which were entrenched in our constitution, which require referendum, etc., etc. And so we put it on ice. So the desire to come up with some form of resolution to the challenges that people face of wanting to hold 2 citizenships is there. We haven't worked it out yet. But as for your example of the medical students who stay on because of the possibility of them, training further, it's not to do with citizenship. Some have chosen, not even them really, some of the countries from which they acquired their training have chosen to lure them into acquiring citizenship of those countries associated with possibilities of further training, because of their own challenges of shortage of personnel in those fields. So you can really treat it as aid that Botswana is providing to those countries, because we trained them up to their first degree, at least medicine, and then they just do the easy bit, right? And 2 is that many of them find our rewards, incomes, not competitive, not attractive. And so we really can't afford some of the people we produce. So it's a contest, and we want to get rich enough to be able to get them back home. But they're free to choose what they want to be.
Okay. Can we take a question from here? Yes.
Mr. President, my name is Samuel. I think I can speak from here. And I'm from Ghana. and I've had a long-standing interest in Botswana and development, and I've held this view that Botswana is or was a lucky country in many respects than one. One is it was jumped over by colonialism and roots. There is the coincidence of culture and tradition, as well as the Westminster model it is operating now. There is this name I've always struggled to pronounce, the Gotla or?
Khotla.
Okay.
Khotla, guttural KG.
Okay. And I would like to know how it operates now, its functionality now, as well as there is one party which has ensured consistency of leadership and policy, as well as Kama, who happened to be the leader of the nationalist movement, also happened to be the leader, the legitimate leader of his traditional people. And there is one dominant ethnic group in the country, which means that the scramble of Africa also favored Botswana. So would you agree with me that Botswana is, and forever will remain a lucky country? And my second question is, you hammered so much on management of resources, but you didn't give us, going into management is by people, manning the resources, managing it, appropriating it. How is Botswana able to come up with consistent set of leaders? What is the model?
All right. I'll say some things to you and everybody else, but perhaps you should have coffee after this, because I need to help you correct a few things about who we are and where we're from. One is that the party that Sasra Zakama led, the first president, was pretty recently formed compared to other parties then. Because the first party in Botswana was actually formed in 1959, I think. It was the Botswana Federal Party. And there were real nationalists who were involved, quite a number of protagonists who were associated with Pan-Africanism, your own country actually. They donated 3 Land Rovers to the Pan-Africanist parties. And they were not the parties that won the first election. Sorry, nothing personal. And there were other parties or leaders who were very closely associated with the resistance nationalist movements in South Africa. Because we had a very strong influence on South Africa, because that's where the jobs were, that's where the industries were. The African National Congress, the Pan-Africanist Congress had a lot of influence. And to some extent, some of these were influenced by the resistance Africanist movements in Zimbabwe, which was then Rhodesia. So the Botswana Democratic Party, or Botswana Democratic Party, really formed out of the few educated peers of Sir Zakhama who schooled with him, both in Tiger Kloof, and perhaps were well known in the rest of Botswana, who were moderates. And they blended traditional government systems with the constitutional model, Westminster-based system that evolved. And they succeeded in the first elections quite handsomely. But as to the supposed suggestion that Botswana is made up of one dominant ethnic group, that's also not so. It isn't so. The language Setswana is spoken by an overwhelming majority. There are a number of minority languages spoken, and English too is the commonest foreign language we have, and is a medium of instruction in schools, the official language, as well as Setswana. But there are a number of minority languages that are not as developed, in part because they're not used for instruction or official correspondence. As to luck, yes, there obviously is a measure of luck. But there is also a measure of self-efficacy. We are a determined people. We are a resolute people. We might be calm and mild, but we know what we want and what we don't want. And clearly we frowned upon abuse. We frowned upon excesses. It's not easy to come across any semblances of ostentatiousness in Botswana, even among the leadership. And people have embraced this. And so if you want to lose an election, just do what they're not used to. Buy a massive, I don't even know the name of these cars. What's huh? Big Rolls Royce or the, is it Bach? Yeah, no, we have a Bentley. But if you became ostentatious in Botswana, you're not gonna do well. You're not likely to do well. And so it was very deliberate and planned for. But I would suggest that we have a chat after this, because we intend to be successful, and I hope the luck will always be with us. But we are very determined. Leadership changes. You're asking how we succeed in maintaining these. We have quite a system of selecting leaders, grooming leaders, and/or ensuring that we reproduce leaders. There's no particular school or curricula for it. The same party has been in power since before independence, but it faced a real threat in the last elections, and we just scraped through. We got, 46-point-something% of the total vote, but we were constituency-based, so that saved us. So we got many more votes. But we dug deep into our souls and are going through quite a metamorphosis. And with the term limit system providing for a transition, an automatic transition, 18 months before an election, we're working on a recovery mode. So we're trying to please our people more responsibly, though. So touch wood, we will prevail.
Okay. Yes. Can I have in front here?
Miles Tendi, DPIR and African Studies. Is two questions. First one, you talked a lot about effective management of the diamond resources, but if you could also speak to diversification, because the Botswana economy remains heavily dependent on diamonds. So what plans you have in place to begin to diversify the Botswana economy? And then the second thing concerns your predecessor, Ian Khama. You fired Isaac Kosi, from the Directorate of Intelligence and Security Services. Khama was more pronounced in terms of pro-democracy internationally. You seem to have departed from that. I guess what I'm trying to push you on the second question is where you see yourself departing from the practices of his presidency.
All right, let me take the first one, diversification. We have been trying to diversify for the longest period because we well realized the risks of having a very narrow-based economy. And so we used the revenue from diamonds to first and foremost invest in our people, to build a skill base, broaden the skill base. We invested in the infrastructure so that we broaden the opportunities. But guess what? As we do this, we sit, as geography has not been very kind to us, right next to the most powerful economy in Africa. And from time immemorial, this is where we get back to Cecil Rhodes, I'm afraid. From time immemorial, the structure of the economies of the nation states around South Africa was such that they fed South Africa and they consumed from South Africa. So we're trying to undo systems that have been in place for a very long time. So the conveniences of opportunities of scale and costs of production that are low because they have developed ports, and they have ports in the first place, superior infrastructure, skills, what have you, industries. It's not very easy. We sit as a member of the Customs Union of Southern Africa, the oldest customs union in the world, from 1910. In the terms of articulation of that customs union, South Africa gets the lion's share. And you try negotiating with a massive economy. There are 3 other nation states that are almost as frail or as dependent. There's Namibia, there's Eswatini, there's Lesotho, and there's Botswana. It's only Namibia that has a port of all of us. And it recently got independence from subjugation from South Africa. So it's been a long journey. We have had some measure of success. Our salt production in Suapan, our tourism has provided for that. Until recently, our copper nickel mining. And then even with the diamonds, where we beneficiated and we relocated the sales and valuing, marketing of diamonds from London. There was a huge movement of business. And then our coal reserves. We have massive coal reserves which we're exploiting, and our gas. And even our beef, because the routes of export have been traditionally through South Africa, we're exploiting other routes. Our supply of fuel, we're exploiting other routes. And currently we're building a very strategic bridge with rail provision between Botswana and Zambia, the Kazungula Bridge. And that would be a real avenue for movement of goods to the north. And if you look at our population dynamics going into the future, that's where the population, the markets are going to be growing the most. So it's a struggle which is not ending. We have not achieved all. We'll continue to do our best as we try and reconfigure our economy so that it can actually export. As to do with my differences in terms of adjustment of policy and outlook to UN. Yes, I can confirm I did fire the Director General of the intelligence agency for good reasons. So good the reasons are they shan't be shared so easily. It was really out of my interpretation of what improved governance meant. Right? So I asked him to leave immediately. And I guess it was not expected. I mean, many people didn't think so. And many people perceived him as excruciatingly powerful, intimidating. Not for me. I asked him to go. He's gone. Right? We had a party manifesto from the 2014 elections, which I was a critical part of. And I was part of government because I was vice president. But if you read our constitution, the role of a president, an executive president of a country, is somewhat different from that of a vice president. So until you get to that seat, then do you have all full authority to take the decisions that you think are in the best interest of your political party, government, and people. And given that, we are one party and one government, we are also governed by the principle of collective responsibility. So yes, we got along and did things, but it wasn't always that there would be universal agreement on some of those. So I decided, after I got in the position, I appointed a cabinet, and we went on a retreat. So I involved every of my ministers and assistant ministers in the analysis of what challenges lay before us. And it was really out of those, I'm sure I led, it was out of those that the redirectioning emerged. I had provided indications of some of the adjustments I expected to happen in my inaugural address. And that's how it happened.
Okay. Can we
You're feeling very dissatisfied. Another cup of coffee.
Yes, can we have, yeah, the guy at the end here?
Mr. President, thank you for coming here today, sir. My name is Jordan Castle, and I'm part of the African Studies program here. Botswana has an amazing track record when it comes to protecting its wildlife. Unfortunately, that can't be said for her neighbors in Southern Africa. And I was wondering what ways you, as president, can help your neighbors in the fight against poaching and wildlife trafficking.
Well, I've really come here primarily for the illegal wildlife trade meeting. And there's some heads of state who have come. But we have in our region a wonderful organization and system called the CASA. And that really involves a collective outreach and management of our resources. And so one of the things that I've pledged to do, I had a meeting with Prince William just now before I came here. And I also did inform him that I am committed to getting into a more inclusive, accommodating, helpful engagement with my neighbors to see how best we can help. But among the things that we would offer would be to offer them these beautiful, wonderful species that you don't often keep in the house as a pet. It's called an elephant. Because we do share them in the first place. They migrate across boundaries, but they happen to like staying in our place more often than anywhere else. So we've offered Mozambique like 500 of those, but we need, as part of your commitment as part of your responsibility as members of the international community, particularly those who have a voice and an opinion about what these should be, is you play your part. We've ensured that we've husbanded these animals. They are our contribution to a global diversity and the global ecosystem. And if they're giving us the challenge of the numbers as they are now, you pitch in, raise the money so that we can have them relocated and provided for safety in the neighboring countries. Because the neighboring countries, some of them are emerging from conflict. And the conflict, though a little old, has residue landmines left still in the ground in some places. And an elephant has a very good memory, it remembers. So if one gets blown off, they all go back to where there is nothing but an oasis of peace and good people like us. So we want to help them by sharing this resource, but sharing too our institutions of training, our modus operandi for protection of these. But more than anything else, we need to make sure that we put our people at the center of conservation. That's what's really important to come across, put across.
Okay, I'll take 3 questions. I'm mindful of time. I take one here, and then the guy at the back, you had your hands up earlier. So we'll take the 3 sets and see if we have a few more minutes. I'll take 1 or 2 more. Yes. One question, please, and briefly.
Yeah. Mr. President, my name is Coralie. I'm also part of the Master Program in African Studies, and thank you for being here tonight. So we've spoken of social justice, human rights, and employment, and so on. But in order to attain those goals, I believe that there's a need to have a discussion about gender. And from what I've heard, in your country, more than half of women have gone through a form of sexual, physical assault. So in your mandate in the future, how do you plan on addressing that issue? Thank you.
Besides beating all the men up.
Okay. Yes.
This is kind of returning to Miles's line of question. I'm Esther, by the way, also from African Studies. Another difference of Ian Kharma's presidency was that he was very outspoken and he had very critical foreign policy. To what extent do you aim to continue that? And considering you're quite different to Ian Kharma and other predecessors, what do you think are the defining ideologies of a BDP, or to what extent is it different under each leader?
Okay. And then, yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ramasisi Dumela. Baso is my name. My question is in relation to Botswana has been enjoying for a very long time good ratings internationally, and we've always heard from the international organization how good Botswana is. I just want to hear from the president in his own view whether, one, you think this is consistent with the reality at home, and two, are there any specific challenges in the pursuit of good governance in Botswana that you consider as challenging, and what measures your government will be considering in addressing that? Thank you.
Right. Can I start with gender?
Yes.
Yes, it's true. There is an unfortunate amount of gender-based violence. And much as we have done fairly well in terms of, promoting gender equality, we've been more successful in some places and not so successful in others. If you take the judiciary, for instance, we've been pretty successful. The political landscape, we've done really badly as a nation state. Educational attainment and the public service, we've done pretty well. But a proxy to what the real relations are like and the level of peace is just that, gender-based violence. And so I think one of the things we need to do is not only engage in very, deep discussion about this across the political divide, we need to offer a response to deter, and solidly so. And it must get right into the household, because a lot of this is occurring in the intimate space. And it's particularly worrying when you have the kind of prevalence levels of HIV that we have, because one of the key things to unlock when you want to deal with HIV and AIDS is to empower women and the girl child to have choices, so that they are not choice disabled. And gender-based violence, particularly in the intimate space, speaks to a challenge to deal with multifaceted other underlying problems in society. So I take this, pretty seriously. It's like the issue of children and what you do to raise children. And UNICEF is doing a laudable job at home to try and encourage all political parties to embrace the rights of children as we raise them. So thanks for that. I think it's a massive challenge that we all have to respond to. And the benefits out of it, the profit we'd reap, is enormous and would be there for a number of years. The other question here was, am I going to be continuing with a very robust foreign policy that is outspoken? I think not. Because I personally think you yield more when you engage. When you condemn publicly too quickly, you tend to alienate. And if you're to seek to be of influence, I think we ought to engage. And that's the nature of foreign relations that I'd want to promote. And my chief advisor in this regard is in agreement with me.
Yes, sir.
That was not forced. I mean, so I get a lot of influence from her. So I won't be doing that. I don't know if that was the only part of the question, but there's another one.
Yeah, the second part. Sorry, Wale, two questions.
Yeah.
The second part was the BDP looks very different under you to how it
Oh,
looked
I
under
see.
President Khama. What are the continuing ideological sort of strands that run through all BDP presidents, or how much can it be different under each leader?
Well, besides our colors of identification and our symbol, the one common denominator of the BDP is our commitment to social democratic ideals. We are fundamentally a social democratic party. We have a very strong creed and disposition to inclusivity and order in the way we organize ourselves and the way we resolve our challenges. We're deeply patriotic. We're committed to harnessing the resources of the country, managing them for the benefit of the people. The BDP is fundamentally committed to democratic ideals. So elections, and democratic free elections. We're the only party, for instance, that engages University of Botswana Democracy Research Project in the conduct of our internal elections at a central committee level. We're the only party that does that. So we don't even manage those elections ourselves. The other parties elect the central committees on their own. We feel so strongly about the need for that and feel so assured of our systems that we can have other persons manage those. And those are critical because they select the leadership of the party. And when you select the leadership of a BDP in Botswana, you're essentially selecting the leadership of the country. That's how important it is. So we think there's a certain measure of consistency. There is a difference of personality of leadership, and therefore flair and complexion of leadership. And some of the examples given were like you did. I mean, am I going to be condemning those that ought to be condemned publicly or not? No. And we're talking, but are we going to be speaking strongly out of principle for those things that we feel strongly about? Yes, we will. If you have a policy like apartheid then, separate development, the South Africans had, we would be pretty public about it. We're pretty, public about the need to have fairness and peace and stability. And so we will call on those that we think are abusive. We've been pretty public about our commitment to the necessity of containment of power, particularly excessive or abuse of power, impunity. We very firmly believe that leaders should not be allowed to get away with murder. We are very consistent in our commitment to the obligation of nation states to international law and practice, and domestically the rule of law. So those will remain. And we just remain a very nice party. As for Botswana, good governance. If I recall, the question was whether we'd continue with that.
Yeah, the question is we're enjoying these good ratings internationally.
The ratings internationally, and
in your view,
how do you maintain that? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we're enjoying those ratings. You're asking also if my view was whether they are reflective of reality. In some respects, I think they're reflective of reality. In some respects, I think they're slightly off the mark. For instance, I'm worried about, the perception indicators. These are only perceptions. I happen to know the perceptions domestically, and I happen to know some measure of reality. And one of the things that I'm concerned about, and that's why I put in my inaugural address that we need to provide for a bill on the declaration of assets and liabilities, is the issue of corruption. Just because Botswana has been ranking as the least corrupt country in Africa as per the Transparency International Perception Index, does not mean there is an absence of corruption. And you must never take your foot off the pedal on matters to do with corruption, because if it spirals out of control, you'll be in trouble. So we want to re-energize ourselves at assaulting any semblances, incidents, opportunities of corruption. It's particularly when times get harder and there are loopholes in systems and new technologies emerge. If ICT is growing as it is, opportunities do emerge. And in pursuit of containing that, we just passed a raft of 28 pieces of legislation, 28 pieces on anti-money laundering in pretty record time. And we're going to be broadening our areas of audit. We put in an asset forfeiture bill and a system to seize. So we're moving along, but we need to do more. Our health ratings, our nutrition indicators, our education indicators, when all these are put together, they provide for our rate and level of development, and particularly our measure of the SDGs. I'm not satisfied, because when you move a system, an organization as big as a country, you really need to apply yourselves and focus on the details. And those of you who come from Botswana generally know what the challenges are to do with distribution of medicines and the inefficiencies in the system, because so many of them expire before they're distributed. So the problems of management that we need to tackle. And I'm glad some of you come to these fine institutions. And so a measure of how good Oxford is, if we had any students here, would be how well we do in Botswana when they apply what they've learned. So we'd have that too. As for our commitment to ensuring that we keep on course, it is without a doubt. That's the reason why we exist. And for us, and particularly those who are limited in terms of the terms we can serve, we look forward to the day when we retire into a society where you are free to walk the streets day or night. In the event that there is an infraction, even a traffic offense visited upon you, you can report to an honorable, decent police, woman or man, and they will take action. And there's water to drink, clean water, clean air, and our flora and fauna is still the wonder of the world. And finally, because you all might not know, we have the largest inland delta in the world. Mm-hmm. We want to keep it so. It's a precious resource, where a whooping 11.3 billion cubic liters of the freshest water in the world flows and drains out into an oasis in the desert. And what magic comes from it, only God can tell you. So come visit Botswana.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, audience. I will hand it back to thank Mr. President finally.
Thank you again, Mr. President. That was a brilliant discussion, and I want to thank everyone for your attendance tonight and for your great questions. And, oh, sorry. Yeah. Your Excellency, we have a small gift on behalf of the Dean for you, something to remember your visit by.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
As is our custom, we will open it.
I'll come on this side.
Ah, it's a fake diamond. Oh, that's very nice. Cufflinks. A pen, one. A notepad. And a newsletter. And paper bag.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.